Namaste, Prashanthi Reddy garu.
Hello, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. And Prashanthi Reddy garu, we got a lot of questions from our viewers related to the family-based immigration and requesting for related processes and requirements. So first, we would like to know what are the main categories of family-based immigration?
So, the main categories of family-based immigration is, first of all, immediate relative category. In the immediate relative category, the US citizens can file for their minor children, unmarried minor children. They can also file for their spouses, and they can file for their parents. So this is the immediate relative category. And under this category, there is no quota. There's no green card numbers availability. So there is no priority date unavailability. So at any given point of time, priority date is always available.
Okay.
So it's always the fastest way to get a green card is if you happen to be a family member of a US citizen, an immediate relative. So that is the first category. Then the next category is the married spouses and children over 21 of US citizens. That is one category. Another category, F2A, is permanent residents, so not US citizens, but permanent resident spouses. And then we also have brothers and sisters of US citizens. So these are a few family-based categories that we have based on which you can immigrate to the United States.
Okay, all right. So, Prashanthi Reddy garu, what is the difference between immediate relatives and family preference categories?
Yes, that's a good question. Immediate relatives, as I said, there is no quota, meaning there is no cap. So at any given point of time, you always have availability to file the green card. There's an unlimited number of green cards can be filed for immediate relative category. For all the other family preference categories that I mentioned, all the other categories, there is a cap. So there are only a certain number of green cards that are given out each year. And when those green cards numbers get over, then you cannot file your green card. So every year and every month, actually, you go to the visa bulletin. There's something called a visa bulletin, which is available on a website called travel.state.gov. So on that, if you go and check on visa bulletin, and if you go to the family-based categories, there are two tables in the family-based categories. One is dates for final action and dates for filing. Generally, we look at dates for final action, and every month it'll tell you which date that they're working on. So if your priority date, that is the date that you file your I-130 application, that's your priority date. So if your priority date is after the date that appears on that table, then you can file. If it is not, then you cannot file. Just giving you an example, especially for Indian nationals, for visa preference categories, all visa preference categories, there is a backlog. So for permanent resident spouses, for example, the backlog is actually right now it's current, but usually there's a backlog. For brothers and sisters of US citizens, for example, there's a backlog of almost 15 years, I think, or more.
Oh, wow.
Because the demand is so high and the availability is so low. So that's why that creates a backlog. So that is the key difference between immediate relative and preference categories.
Okay, okay. So, how does this visa bulletin impact the family-based immigration?
It does. As I said, the reason that it affects is the processing time is affected. So the visa bulletin is the priority dates are recognized by the filing of the I-130, as I said. The date that you file the I-130 is the priority date for your application. And the priority, if you look at the visa bulletin, they're working on various different priority dates. Except for immediate relative category, all of the priority dates are backlogged.
Okay. Okay.
So you have to wait until your date becomes current for you to actually get a green card, because the final stage of the green card, you can file an I-130, get an approval, but in order to file the immigrant visa petition if you're outside the country, or in order to file adjustment of status, which is a 485 application if you're in the country, in the US, your priority date has to be current, or it should have passed that date.
Okay.
For you to file the final application. And that again, when you do that, processing time for that is about 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
So you're looking at, again, another 12 to 18 months. And while the application is pending during this processing time, the date should continue to remain current. If it retrogresses during that time, then again your 485 will just stay in a pending state.
Okay.
And if you're in the country and you're filing a 485, there's some benefits even in a pending state because you are in the country already. You can travel using advance parole, so you don't need a visa to travel back and forth. And you can also get employment authorization. This will allow you to work. So these are the advantages of, being in the country when you're filing a 485. But if you're outside the country, then just have to wait until your priority date becomes current, and you cannot even come into the US or get work authorization or any kind of benefit. Only once you get the green card, then you can come in on a green card. So the priority dates make a huge difference for your processing time.
That was valuable information, Prashanthi Reddy garu. And we want to know who can sponsor a family member for a green card.
So as I was saying, different visa categories have different sponsors. The F1 category is, well, first there's the immediate relative category. As I said, US citizen spouses, US citizen minor children and unmarried children, and US citizen parents. That's immediate relative category. Then F1 category is unmarried sons and daughters of US citizens. So that is backlogged, but you can do it. And then the next category, the second category is spouses and children and unmarried sons and daughters of permanent residents. That's F2A. F1 is unmarried sons and daughters of US citizens. F2A is spouses and children of permanent residents. And then the third, F3 category, is married sons and daughters of US citizens. So this order of priority that I'm giving you, it makes it worse and worse. So there's more and more backlog. After F3 comes F4, which is brother and sister of US citizens. So if you look at the table for the final action dates for the month of August, and if you look at India, F1, which is the best category, they're working on 2015 cases. So what is that? That's 10 years. F2A, which is actually a little better than the first category, is 2017. F2A is spouses of permanent residents. So that's 2017. Not that great, but not as bad. Then it gets worse. F2B is 2015. F3 is 2009. And F4, siblings of US citizens, is 2005. So you see to what extent we have the backlog.
Yeah. Yes. So, Prashanthi Reddy garu, what are the eligibility requirements for sponsoring a spouse or a child or a parent?
So for the immediate relative category, you have to show proof of relationship. So that's the main document. You also have to show, you have to also submit your birth certificate. So depending on whether you are in the country or outside the country, when I say country, I mean the US. Depending on whether you're in the US or outside the US, the processing and the time period taken and the eligibility, the documents that have to be submitted are a little different. So if you're presently in the country, then you have to file something called a 485, I-130 and 485 application. I-130 is common for both categories. But if you're in the country, you have to file a 485 adjustment of status application. Along with that adjustment of status application, you're able to get advance parole, which will allow you to travel. And you can also get employment authorization, which will allow you to work. And processing time is about 12 to 18 months if the visa number is available. If you are outside the country, then you have to file an I-130, of course. And once the I-130 is approved, we have to do an I-130 for consular processing. Once that is approved, we have to file an immigrant visa petition with the National Visa Center. This is done online. And the DS-260 forms has to be filled out. And all supporting documents have to be submitted online.
Okay.
So once NVC approves this, then it goes to the consulate. The consulate will review everything. The Mumbai consulate, actually only the Mumbai consulate looks at family-based cases.
Mhm.
Immigrant visa petitions, actually, it will be employment-based or family-based. The Mumbai consulate will call you for an interview. They will take all your original documents. You have to get a police clearance certificate. You have to get your medicals done. You have to get your biometrics, so your fingerprinting, etc., done. And once everything is clear, then you will get an immigrant visa to come into the US. And once you come in on that immigrant visa application, on that immigrant visa that's stamped in your passport, at the port of entry, you will be processed for your green card and you'll get the green card in the mail in a few months. So that's the process if you're outside the country. Now, with reference to documents that you have to submit for both of, whether it be a 485 or an immigrant visa petition for people who are outside the country, it's pretty much the same documents, except the fact that police clearance is not required because you're in the US. They will do their own clearance. FBI will do its own clearance. You don't have to do anything. They do it themselves. But you have to submit medicals. You have to show that you've taken all the COVID vaccinations and all the other vaccinations that are required. They want to make sure that you don't have any diseases. They want to make sure that you're not a public charge for both cases, whether you're outside or in the country. You don't have a potential to become a public charge, or you've never been a public charge before. When I say public charge, I mean that they don't want you to be depending on the United States government for money,
Okay.
right? So the US government gives money and housing to people who cannot afford it. So they don't want
Mhm.
you to be one of those people who will be a burden on the
Okay.
government.
Yeah.
So that's the public charge rule. They will do the proper assessment to make sure that you're not a public charge. For example, if you are have the proper qualifications to work, you may not be considered to be a public charge. If you have someone that is willing to sponsor you and to submit the affidavit of support, for example, your US citizen, say if we're talking about the US citizen filing for their spouse, the US citizen has to submit an affidavit of support saying that we will support this person, I will support this person monetarily and provide them with housing and body and everything. So then you are not likely to be uh, considered to be a public charge, right? So public charge is a big issue when it comes to filing family-based cases. In addition to that, they want proof of relationship, as I said. So if you're marrying a US citizen spouse, then the marriage certificate is key. So you have to submit the marriage certificate. They're also, and if you're, says, filing for your parents or your children, then birth certificate is key, right? Because that's where the relationship is mentioned in the birth certificate.
Mm.
If you are born after the 1980s and if you don't have a birth certificate, then you have to submit a non-availability certificate from the municipal authority of the town where you were born, saying
Okay.
that your birth was never registered. And then you have to submit secondary evidence such as affidavit, school leaving certificate, maybe letter from your hospital where you were born, that kind of thing to show, when you were born and where you were born. So birth certificate becomes very important. With reference to your US citizen, say if it's a spouse, the petitioner, they have to submit their proof of citizenship if they're citizens, right? So they have to submit either their passport or their birth certificate to show they were born in the US, or their naturalization certificate if they were, naturalized, that is, they got their citizenship,
Mhm.
afterwards, not by birth. So it becomes an important document again. If you're filing marriage-based cases, then there is always a presumption of fraud because there's a lot of fraud where marriage-based cases are concerned. So they want to make sure that your marriage is not fraudulent. And then
Mm.
the presumption is there is fraud, so you have to submit documentation showing that you have a bona fide marriage. So the documentation that you can submit is joint documents. Any joint documents that you have, joint tax returns, joint bank statements, health insurance, life insurance,
Mhm.
photographs, proof that you're living together. maybe a joint lease or a property which is under both names, right? So these are some of the joint documents that become important, especially in marriage-based cases. In addition to that, if the person is in the US, then you'll have to submit proof of status. So where is the person in the US? What is their status? Did they enter legally into the US? Remember, for immediate relatives, even if you're out of status, you can still file, but you should not have crossed the border. You should have been inspected, meaning you should have entered legally.
Okay.
So these are some of the documents that can be submitted in these type of cases.
That was a very valuable information, Prashanthi garu. Thank you so much. And what are the income requirements for sponsors and what is the affidavit of support?
That's another great question. The income requirements, it depends on the family size. I believe it's about $25,000 per year. If you are a family of four, so it has to be above that. So the petitioner, whoever is petitioning for you, has to have a salary of that much
Okay.
or more. If they have a family of four, plus then you will be five if they're sponsoring for you also, right? So there is a certain table, and it has to be above 25,000, and depending on the family size. Now, if the income requirements are not enough, say your principal, the petitioner is not working, but say the petitioner's spouse is working, then the petitioner's spouse can provide an additional affidavit of support and submit their tax returns. So even if you don't meet the income requirement as a petitioner, you can, there is a way around it. So you have to submit an additional affidavit of support.
Superb. So can a green card holder sponsor the family members, or is this privilege is only limited to the US citizens?
Green card is, as I was saying, F2A. So a permanent resident can only sponsor their spouses.
Okay.
And their children, of course, as dependents, right, in the same application. That's the only, so they cannot sponsor their parents, they cannot sponsor their siblings.
Okay.
Yeah, they cannot sponsor their siblings, only their spouses and their children.
Okay. Okay. And what are the steps involved in filing a family-based immigration petition, that is the form I-130?
So when you're filing an I-130, you have to, of course, make sure that you fill out the form correctly. The form has information about the family member who you're sponsoring, and also has information about you, the petitioner. So you have to make sure you fill out all that information correct. A lot of it is biometric information, name, place of birth, addresses, where you employment. A lot of information is that, and there's also some questions with reference to, yes and no questions with reference to if you have done this, have you ever been a public judge, have you ever done anything wrong, etc., etc. So you have to answer those questions as well with a yes and no. In addition to that, you have to submit the documentation, as I just mentioned, the documentation, proof of relationship, status documentation, medicals. You don't have to submit at the I-130 stage. That's only for the 485. But all the other documents that I mentioned for the 485 apply to the I-130 as well.
Okay.
And for immediate relative cases where the visa number is immediately available, and if the person is in the US, you can file both the I-130 and 485 concurrently together. And along with this application, you can also file the work authorization and advance parole. So you're applying for all these applications together. And the documented request, the documents needed is really the same. But if you're filing the I-130 separately, then you don't need to submit medicals, you don't need to submit affidavit of support. But other than that, all the other documents of relationship, proof of status, all that has to be submitted.
Okay, thank you so much, Prashanthi Reddy garu. And we have so many questions to ask you, but because of the time constraint, we have to limit the conversation. One last question: what are the common reasons for the denial of family-based visa petitions?
That's a good question also. I know I'm saying for everything because you do have good questions. I'm saying it's a good question. And this is what the audience wants to hear. And this kind of gives, like an overview of the entire topic by, asking good questions. So, with reference to denial reasons, there could be many denial reasons. One of them could be that you didn't pay the correct fee, right? Some basic denial reasons. Could be that you didn't sign correctly wherever you had to sign. Maybe you didn't fill out the form correctly. Maybe you didn't submit proper documents, right? Sometimes if you don't submit a birth certificate, they'll send a request for further evidence asking for it. And even then, if you don't submit a proper document, proper birth certificate, based on the format that they want, then they just deny it because they will not send more than one request for further evidence. So you have to make sure that you meet all the requirements, you fall under the particular category that you're filing under, and that you meet the requirement with reference to public charge, as I was saying, and the document requirements as well. And fill out the form properly, send the proper fees. And send it to the right. The last but not the least is send it to the right address.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prashanthi Reddy garu, for sharing such valuable information with us. So, viewers, this is our talk show on family-based immigration, and we will be coming up with next episode. And for any specific case-related legal advice, please reach out to law offices of Prashanthi Reddy garu at reddyesq.com and email prashanthi at reddyesq.com and phone number 212-354-1010. With this, signing off, this is your host, Prashanta.
Don't forget to subscribe to our videos if you like what you see. Also, give us a thumbs up and share the video with your family and friends. Thank you.